Hello, BookTube! Oh my god, this is so exciting. I have been out of this for like months now. I don't even want to see when I uploaded my last BookTube video because it's been way too long. I've been really busy with schoolwork and I was also sick for a couple of weeks actually, and it's been wild. So yeah, I haven't been active both in like YouTube but also just reading. Like I think in the last month in May I just read one book, which for me is not a lot. I mean, it's fine. Like it's perfectly fine. But yeah, I had just not been reading in general. But I am so excited to be back. I think the school period is basically over now and summer is here, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great, and I am so excited because I am talking about books again. So I mean, it's June officially, so I think a good way to come back and talk about books again with a lot of excitement would be to share some recent um, reads related to the month of Pride. Yeah, so let's just get into it. I will share some recommendations from this year for you, and then I will be sharing what I want to read. Yeah, like for the rest of the year. And let's just start with a big one, and this is Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. As you can see, I tabbed it. I think this is the only book that I've ever tabbed, which is kind of fun. But I read this in like a three-way um, book club, kind of, with two different groups of friends, and it was so interesting to discuss this. Basically, if you don't know what this is about, the Left Hand of Darkness follows a man called Genli, I think he's called, something like that, and he is kind of an envoy from this really big intergalactic as like space, what do you call it, confederation kind of, and he is sent as an envoy to this this planet that is called Winter by them. It's a really cold place where people that are native to this planet, they don't have like a fixed sexuality or like gender, I should say, but rather they are kind of genderless for most of the month. During a specific time of the month, they enter kind of a biological phase called Kemer, where they kind of get assigned a gender, and it's temporary. It could be male, female, and it can change from one year or from one month to the next. So obviously, this is a society that is very kind of gender fluid. The envoy is sent here to convince the planet to join this confederation, and at the same time, he is mm, confronted with this society that operates completely different to how he's used to. Not only in the way like these people are biologically different, and he's kind of this outsider, and he's seen as an abomination because it's like, oh, how can you be fixed to this like one gender? That's crazy. For them, it's so normal to just be so fluid and switching around genders all the time, and uh, it's kind of funny because men can be mothers, and or like people can be like a man in one month and then the next month be a woman and birth a child and then go back to be a man the next time. So it's kind of funny. So anyway, so he's kind of confronted with these uh, different society, and also like socially, I would say there are very big differences with how this place operates because there is no predominance of kind of patriarchy, I would say. It's a very fascinating read about finding kind of beauty in differences and this friendship that stems from these two people that don't really understand each other but kind of come to terms to it, and how the fact that they are so different is what actually allows them to really understand each other from a place of that difference. It's a classic of the science fiction genre, and Ursula K. Le Guin has some of the most fantastic quotes. I mean, I feel like if I just read through the whole thing here, that could be its own video, and I don't want this to be super long. but she has some quotes that are amazing with the theme of pride. There's a lot to talk about this culture, but I do want to highlight that the sci-fi elements are also amazing, and I think Ursula K. Le Guin succeeded at building two very, very distinct cultures with their own political systems that are very, very different, and I think have their own kind of advantages and disadvantages, and fascinating read. Honestly, what a way to start. But yeah, Left Hand of Darkness, great recommendation. Let's move to something more contemporary, and this is going to be Enrique Serna's Fruta Verde. I will be a bit more brief because I couldn't find any translation for this book to English, or well, I only looked for English. But anyways, this is a Mexican author, so that's amazing. And this is the story about Germán, a young man that is trying to basically come to terms with his kind of life and who he is, what he wants to do profession wise. He's, I think, right out of high school, I want to say. So he's thinking about, what career path he wants to follow, what ideologies he wants to believe in, and there is obviously a component about his own sexual identity, and I think this is based on the book's author, this character, and he's the central axis of this story. But we follow two more POVs. One of them is Germán's mother. She is a woman that has very, very strong opinions about basically everything, and she wants to believe, at least, that she holds this very high kind of moral ground, and she is so, pure and proper, and she condemns a lot of actions as improper regarding like the youth behaving in certain ways, and obviously she has a lot of I guess you could say like homophobia or like discrimination against queer people, and these very strong moral systems clash with the fact that she actually falls in love with one of Germán's friends. So she's maybe in her 40s and Germán is in he's like 18 years old. So she needs to face this reality where she is feeling very like she feels very alive thinking about this kid, and basically he's a kid, and making a almost like a life with him or having a relationship with him, because this kid she falls in love with, he is very he likes to discuss literature. He likes to be, instead of, the family holds these huge parties, and instead of being, he likes dancing and everything, but instead of being like drinking and everything as Germán and the other guys, he's sitting with the old women and discussing things, and just having kind of more mature, I guess, conversations. So she's very attracted to this guy that is kind of in her own wavelength, socially and like intellectually, but he's very young, and she feels so, I guess, alive that someone so young and like attracted could be attracted by her. So anyways, and then the third narrator is Mauro, who is Germán's co-worker, and he is a gay man from kind of the southeast of Mexico, and he is this, I would say, very stereotypical, like very flamboyant, very femme presenting gay person, and he is an author of poetry and theater plays, especially theater plays. But they work together in this marketing company, and so you have this, and he is trying to seduce Germán to basically be with him, even though Germán has always been very like he has always dated girls. It was very fun to read a book that centers around a bisexual character, but you have these other two important figures in his life that make up a constellation of morality and sexuality, and it's super interesting. A book from Mexico, Fruta Verde, and really, really cool by representation, I felt like. So let's change gears a bit, and let's talk about Cloud Cuckoo Land, a book that I have hinted at, I think, a lot in previous videos, because this has been sitting on my shelf for ages now, like literal years. And I love this cover. I mean, this is, I don't know if you can see. Ah, there we go. It has like a shiny gold foil in these kind of details, and it's beautiful. And anyways, I'm digressing. But this was a really fun um, Cloud Atlas esque narrative where you have three stories that are interwoven. One set in Constantinople in the very past, uh, a story that's in modern day USA. I think in Chicago, I want to say, or somewhere around there, and then in the very future, uh, in a spaceship. And one of the three POVs that you follow, one of the three characters, is an old gay man that is has become a professor of like languages, or actually I think I don't remember if he's a professor of, he's retired and he's teaching kids. He's setting up this play, um, this Greek play that he translated, and the play is kind of the thing that ties the whole story together with the past, present, and future. I really liked these kind of stories that interweave how things just are connected through time in very powerful ways, in ways that we don't imagine, and something that is so small and simple thousands of years ago can still make an impact and save someone's life thousands of years later. I think those stories are so powerful, and I really liked reading. Yeah, I really liked reading most of them. I think the Constantinople story was a bit slow for me in comparison to the others. I think the pacing just felt a bit off. Um, but I will say I think this is a great story for people that like some historical fiction because it has a bit of that. It has some sci-fi elements because one of the stories is set in the future. Um, Even though it's not like a hardcore sci-fi story, I think the sci-fi elements were interesting and it served the purpose of the story. And I think I was reading this and it was always captivating, but I think it really came together at the end. And again, how all of these stories wrap together, it was really hard to stop reading. And yeah, I also liked the representation of an older gay character. He didn't have this like super tragic story or anything. You actually get to see a bit of his um, younger years when he was in the Korean War, I want to say, or like maybe it was even World War II. I don't know, but he was a war prisoner actually in yeah, in a camp, and he became really good friends with this other character, and I think that's potentially where his sexuality starts like blooming, and it was also a super pretty relationship to read about, and that's how he gets really into translation and Greek myths. And again, this is where the story kind of gets pulled together, so I don't want to say a lot about that. So yeah, I don't know, really cool having some more passive, or yeah, more passive representation, even though the story is not necessarily about, you know, being queer or like sexuality, but it is a part of this person's story. So yeah, Cloud Cuckoo Land was a delight to read. I think again, if you like this narrative framework of interwoven stories that especially have different like time, uh, yeah, like time periods, I think you would really like this. Yeah, and that is that. And then the last one that I will talk about, I actually lent it to a friend, but that is Temporada de Huracanes by Fernanda Melchor. This is also a Mexican book, so yay to Mexican stories with queer representation. I think, I'm sure this has translations. Hurricane Season, I think it's called in English. I think it even has a Netflix show. I'm pretty sure it does. And in this one, I think I want to be a bit more brief with the plot or like the premise because I think you should just read it. But one of the characters in the story is trans, and there is actually a lot of conversation about masculinity, which was really interesting. But the basic premise of the story is that you have this very small town in Mexico where, unfortunately, a woman is found dead, and she was referred to as the witch in this town. So there is kind of this voodoo, no, not voodoo, taboo, sorry, taboo element about this woman and her role in the community. And basically, each chapter in the story is the the story about a person living in this town and how they all connect to the central character of the witch, and you get to learn more about the story of their life story, but also more about the witch and this town. And it's brutal. It's very, very hard to read. I think the author Fernanda Melchor, she's a journalist, and she is interested in portraying life as it is and portraying, documenting these events and these stories that I would assume is partly inspired by real events, portraying stories that are not picked up by the media, that are forgotten. And so she does not shy away very graphic details. There's a lot of content warnings that you should be aware of. Look them up. There is obviously a lot of violence, physical, psychological, and emotional, to both men and women in this story. And yeah, it was very hard to read, but I do really recommend it. I think the story is really powerful, and I read it a couple of months ago, and I still think a lot about it. And I think it's always very fascinating to break apart how some social systems in Mexico are really weird when you think about them, especially like regarding like masculinity and gender roles and power, like positions of power, and how all that has like ties to other pieces of the culture and sexuality. And I think it's so interesting. Again, a thrilling read and a very hard one, but I think it's a really, really, yeah, I think it's super worth it. And again, I wouldn't say that sexuality is like the main focus of the story, but it is a big part of it, and I will not say a lot more than that. But great recommendation, and the second one, 2 out of 4 of Mexican authors. Like, we're going on our on. Yeah, this is great. So let's move to the next section of the video, which are some of the books that I am interested in reading. And these are obviously not the only queer books that I will read in the rest of the year, but just some that have caught my attention that I want to prioritize. And as a small kind of parenthesis, something that I have noticed that I am guilty of is using the term queer when I, most of the times, actually, I'm just referring to gay stories. So, for instance, when I talk about like, I like queer fiction or like queer films, I think I'm very guilty, as a lot of people have done historically, of like appropriating the term queer when I'm most of the times referring to gay stories. At least if I look at like the percentage of stories or the representation in the queer stories that I consume, most of the times they are gay representations. And I mean, I think that's fine, but I want to diversify more the stories that I'm consuming, and especially because I do like the term queer as like a fully encompassing great thing. I do want to make sure that I am using that properly and not just um, as referring to gay spaces or stories. And I think that is a problem that has happened a lot historically, like especially I think white gay men appropriating this word a lot in, for instance, in clubs or like um, anyways, doesn't matter. The point is I want to make sure that I'm reading more diversely. So anyways, the first book that I really want to read is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emesi. I'm so sorry, I'm sure I mispronounced that name, but this is a Nigerian author, I'm pretty sure. And the story follows the mother of Vivek, who I think wakes up and opens the door, and Vivek is unfortunately dead on the doorstep. And I think the story follows the mother trying to discover or like find out what happened with their child. And not exactly sure if Vivek is trans or non-binary or both, but I'm pretty sure they use they them pronouns, and yeah, I don't know what people think about this book, but I like that it's a Nigerian author, which I've never read anything by MSC. She's quite well known, and she has a couple of other books that I want to read. And I, again, because right now I want to try to read as much or more diversely. I'm not worried so much about like, is this kind of the book that everyone thinks is like the first to read for, I don't know, trans representation. Um, Not that it's my first book, but yeah, right now I just saw that was available in my library, and I want to read. Uh, I've been meaning to read the Messi's work for a while, so that worked out perfectly. So that's the first one. I feel like it's gonna be pretty sad just based on the title, but I've heard that MSC's prose is beautiful, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Oh. Let's continue. So the second book that I want to read is called Blackouts by Justin Torres, who is a Latino author. And the premise of this sounds very interesting. You have a an old man who lives in this place that is called the Palace, I think, or the Institute or something like that. And he is retelling parts of his story to a younger character who is actually the narrator, who maybe they have some history together. I don't know. And there is a component of this story that is based on a a study that happened in real life. One of, I think, the first studies about sexuality. I don't know. I don't remember the name of the story, but I think it plays a role in the story. But overall, like, we follow this narrator who is visiting the old man, and he's just interested in his life. And there is, I think, a lot about the oral tradition of telling your life story, basically. And it has been compared or like mentioned in relation to the, what is it called? Yeah, this one. El beso de la mujer araña, the kiss of the spider woman. I don't know. There is a translation to this. This is a very classical uh, gay story. um, that is from Manuel Puig. I think they are an Argentinian author, at least somewhere from, yeah, Argentina. And he writes a story about two inmates that are imprisoned, one of them for his political views, and the other one, I'm pretty sure, for being homosexual. And you just follow their conversations in this prison. And yeah, anyways, but I think this other work, Blackouts, has uh, either been directly inspired or like using a bit of that, um, yeah, like premise or narrative framework that I really liked. So yeah, it sounded really interesting, and again, my library had it, so I just rented it. It's on its way. And then the third one is La Cresta de León by Cristina Rivera Garza. There's also a translation in English. For this one, I think it's called the Ilion Crest. I will put a picture, um, by a Mexican author. So I had been meaning to read another book by this same author for this year for another challenge that I'm doing about Mexican authors. And then I realized, or looking at a video for some recommendations, someone started talking about this, and I was like, wait, I own that book, and I didn't know that it dealt with sexual identity or like gender identity. So I was immediately like, oh, I'm just gonna take that instead and do like a swap. Uh, and the premise about this book is wild. Like it, I'm gonna link the video that I watched because the way she describes it, I think, was super fun. But basically, you have two women that break into the narrator's house, and I don't know if he's physically attacked or if they just start interrogating him about his life and his gender identity, and it's kind of a spiral into deconstructing language and how, yeah, like how gender is weaved in language, and how maybe the narrator thought he he was very potentially very, very sure about his masculinity, and how that is so frail. And I don't know, I think it sounds like this whirlwind of a story about the influence of language and like gender and identity, and it sounds so fascinating. And I am so happy because she's a Mexican author and I already had the book. So that also makes 3 out of 3 BIPOC authors for these 3 books that I want to read, which is so exciting. So I am very happy with this list. Let me know if you have any recommendations, if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them. And yeah, I'm so happy to be back in booktube, and yeah, we'll be seeing soon. Bye bye.